Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Grad Life podcast. It's Isabel here, and today I'm speaking with Samuel O'Connor. Samuel attended UCD where he studied law. Upon leaving, he went on to study at King's Inns. He was called to the bar in 2017 and now practices as a barrister in general civil areas of law, with a focus on commercial and chancery litigation. We'll be talking about Samuel's path to becoming a barrister and all the complexities that come with it. This podcast will hopefully be really helpful for any aspiring barristers as we chat about the confusing process of being called to the bar. Hi Samuel, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure, Isabel. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, I guess the best place for us to start is probably bringing it back to when you were 17 or 18, studying for your Leaving Cert, and you made the decision to then go in and study law. What drew you to law initially?
I can't really say that there was only one particular, event or moment or anything like that that drew me into it. There was no real grand design behind it. It was just one of those things, really, where you're looking at what options are available to you, and law stuck out to me as being, an interesting subject, something that was going to stand me well in the long term. I think the cliche is true, is that it is a pretty good general degree in the sense that if you have it, there's a defined career path that's open to you in one sense, and that you can go on and be a solicitor or a barrister, but similarly you can go on and work in the civil service or in private industry or commerce or things like that. So I think it was just a generally attractive degree, and I had some experience in studying it before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there's a thing called CTYI, which is like summer school for exceptionally nerdy children, which takes place in DCU every summer, at least it did. And I did that when I was in, I think, probably first year or second year. So 13 or 14, and you get to go to basically a summer camp on the campus of DCU and take kind of introductory classes, some of which are on they're all kind of designed to mirror and third level experience, and one of them that I did was on legal studies. Now obviously when you go there, they're teaching you the enjoyable and interesting things of subjects, so criminal law, human rights, all that sort of stuff. So there wasn't too much wildly on land law or commercial law being discussed in those summers, but it was interesting and I enjoyed it. And I thought, why not do this?
So you didn't end up going to DCU, you ended up going to UCD. Was there a reason for choosing UCD, or was it just the most convenient?
Self-explanatory. It's the best in the nation by far. No, it wasn't. It wasn't actually my first choice, would you believe? I had an interview in Oxford in St John's College, and obviously I didn't. It wasn't successful at the interview stage there, so I had to forego the dreaming spires of Oxford, and after that, really the next best thing was the brutalist 1960s architecture of Belfield. So that was where I ended up.
I don't think we can say the next best thing. I'll say one of the next best options. So how do you find college? What did you get up to outside of studying law?
I loved it. I was, maybe not as involved in the whole suite of college activities as I should have been, or as some students are. But I was involved in enough things. I was involved in broadcast radio there. So Belfield FM is the student radio station, and I was involved in that basically throughout my time. So I ended up being the treasurer and then the auditor, which is the station manager, which is like the auditor of the society. So that was kind of my main extracurricular pursuit. I was involved in other things as well. The student legal service. I did some volunteering with that. But probably my main extracurricular activity from a law point of view was mooting. So the mooting competition there is called the Cecil Avery Moot, which is an annual moot for law students in UCD. And I competed in that 3 times. The first time I wasn't so successful, and the second time I won it. And then having won it and wanting to retire on my laurels, my partner made me compete the next year again, and we subsequently won it again. So to my knowledge, at the time I was the only person to have won it twice, and I'm not sure if that record still stands. But that I think was very enjoyable, and it was basically an invaluable experience for me in terms of deciding that a career at the bar was something that I'd be interested in. It is really the best way to get experience of advocacy, I think, in your college years, is to participate in the mooting competitions. And even if you have no interest in a career at the bar, or even a career in the law, even if you want to go on and do something totally different, I think it's a good experience to have, at some stage in the course of your professional or private life, you will be called, to give a speech or something like that at some stage. I'm sure for the vast majority of people, whether it be a presentation, for your boss or in your company, whether it be a best man speech or a wedding speech or a eulogy or anything like that. The time will come when people will be called to engage in some degree of public speaking, or whether it be interviewing, giving an interview over a Zoom call or something like that. And I think it's a great experience. It's something I definitely would recommend for all law students to do. It's something which I think really probably should be a core component of the law curriculum. I know in UCD it wasn't. You could totally avoid it if you didn't want to. There was a number of, I think, specialist modules that you could take. One of which I did do with James McDermott, who's a fantastic lecturer and now a colleague at the bar. So it was an option to do, but it wasn't compulsory. And I think possibly if the curricula were being redesigned again, it's something which I think students really should give a go.
And then you talked about your extracurricular there, but looking at the actual study, sitting in the library, what you're doing 9 to 5 every day, did that live up to what you thought it would be like going into study law?
Yeah, I suppose it did. It's like anything else, you can be as busy or as lazy as you want to be. I think I was probably somewhere in the middle. I always did, fine in the exams and all the rest of it. But no, I mean, UCD to me was a tremendous, experience. I have to say, the facilities are second to none. I do joke about it being the premier legal institution in Ireland. I think really there's not much separating any really of the universities. I think if we're being honest about it, you can come out of more or less any university in the country, I think, with a really strong legal education, and one that's going to set you up well for the rest of your life and for your career. I know, my colleagues at the bar, people who I was in the King's Inns with, they came from every more or less every university in the country. So, and again, not many of them, or well, not many of them, but not all of them even did law. So it's by no means a barrier to entry to the profession, and not even having done a law degree. So you can have done anything and still succeed. But I think UCD, the one thing that I would say does set it apart, if I can be so rude, from Trinity, is the new law building. The Sutherland School of Law is just a fantastic facility. It really is absolutely tremendous. I was lucky enough to have experienced it for the last 2 years of my studies, and it is second to none as far as I can see in terms of the facilities. I mean, when I talk about the mooting, there's a purpose-built moot court in the building, which to me it is or was unique in Ireland at that stage. The lecture facilities were fantastic, and the library was fantastic. So yeah, I couldn't fault the UCD experience at all.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with that. So you graduated from UCD and you chose the barrister career path. Why not the solicitor? There's a big argument for going down the solicitor career path.
No, absolutely. And it's, it's certainly, I think, probably the more attractive prospect when you're straight out of law school. I don't think I could argue with that from a practical point of view. I mean, for me, I enjoyed the mooting. That was something that I was, I had some degree of, natural talent for, I suppose. Even when I was in secondary school and in primary school, I was involved in debating. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, amateur dramatics. So I was involved in all of the various different shows when I was in secondary school, and I enjoyed, I suppose, not being the center of attention. But I think if you want a career at the bar, you have to be comfortable enough being in the spotlight, because when you are there in the court, you're advocating on behalf of your client. You're the center of the world for that moment, in that place at that time. Now, it might be the case that the vast majority of people in there aren't listening to you because they're concerned about their own case. They're reading their own notes or whatever. They're just, if they're a party to the litigation that's on after you, they're looking at the window or daydreaming or something like that. But the effect is still there in your mind, that you are the one who's speaking, and you're in a room of maybe 50 people or so. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed not necessarily the sound of my own voice, but I enjoyed being front and center, and particularly with the debating, I enjoyed that immensely. So I think those were where my natural skills lied, and that was why I said, well, so I might as well give the bar a crack.
So you left UCD and then you went to King's Inns, and I think there's this kind of mystery around King's Inns for law students. Maybe it's because so few students actually go on to become barristers. So what's the process then of applying to King's Inn or getting started in King's Inns?
That's a great question, because it's something that isn't really discussed that much in terms of the careers opportunities, the careers fairs. I remember when I was in UCD, and they'd have big halls filled out in the student centre for Law Careers Day, and you'd have representatives there from all the firms, and indeed from firms in the UK and London would have their representatives over. And there was, as far as I can recall, I don't remember speaking to anyone from the bar. I'm not even sure if they send an outreach person out there or whatever, but it definitely is second fiddle in terms of the milk rounds and the sort of preoccupations which the rest of the law students tend to have. And even myself, I think it was somewhat of a bolt in the dark. I went on the website and I figured out what you needed to do, and I think I talked to one or two other people who were applying, who I knew were applying, but I mean, that was it. Well, there were, I think there were, I'm going to say maybe 5 of us, I think, from my year who ended up going down out of a year of in excess of 100. So you are in the very small minority. But I mean, the process itself is, at least in my day, which was some 5 or 6 years ago, whatever it is, but it's quite an intense application process, in that you have to sit entrance exams. And again, at least when I did it, the entrance exams were, I think, 5 exams, one after the other in consecutive days, Monday to Friday. You cover all of the core topics that you would have done in your undergrad. But the difficulty with them, I think, is not so much in their content or in their complexity, but just in the fact that you have to sit them, as I said, one after the other, sort of war of attrition style. And I did notice, and I think it's probably a frequent occurrence, that the numbers drop off from the Monday to the Friday. So they are sat in the examination hall, in the dining hall in the King's Inns, surrounded by quite luxurious paintings and wood panelings, and all the trappings that go with that. And you're sat at a desk taking the exams from Monday to Friday. And by the Friday, the numbers generally have petered off quite a bit, with people who maybe didn't think that they got on so well in the early exams and decided not to return for the rest of them. So that's just something that I would generally advise against. I know it's easier said than done, but if someone is thinking about taking the exams and they feel like they've had a bad day on the Monday or the Tuesday, and that they had an exam that didn't really go their way, my advice would be just try and grind it out. Just come back the next day anyway and do the exam, because you never know how poorly you did. And I think students can tend to be, or people can tend to be a little bit fatalistic about these things. They can overemphasize the negative points in an exam or whatever, when really they probably did fine, or they could have just got there, just there or thereabouts. So again, if I'm giving advice to students who are sitting the exams, I'd say whatever you do, just come in Monday to Friday and sit the things, because even if you did have a horror exam and you failed, it'll give you the confidence to come back the next time and say, well, listen, at least I got them out of the way. I did all 5 of them, and I can come back and sit them again. And I think you can also pass by compensation in 1 or 2 of them or something. So if you just about fail one, you can boost that up if you do well enough in the others. So that's the entrance exam. So quite daunting, but at the same time, I think not as scary as maybe I've made it out to be, because the content really isn't that difficult. That's what I'd impress on people. It's nothing more complicated than you've already sat and passed as an undergrad.
And is it like the FE1s where you need to take time off before you go and sit them, or is it very much straight from college into the exams?
No, so some people do, and I know that some of the private colleges, independent colleges, and Griffith College, I think, do prep courses or study courses that you can take. Now I didn't do any of that. I took maybe a couple of weeks off before, and just and I did fine. So again, I mean, it depends on your own on your own study regime, how well you do with these things, how well you cope. Yeah, I think it's not a case of taking a year off to study for them or anything like that. People might take a month or whatever to go over, set up a study plan. And again, some people do pay for private grinds, private tuition in some of the private colleges. Again, not something I did. I think probably most people don't do that, but the option is there if that's something that I think you might want.
So then, once you get through the entrance exams, you actually start studying officially to become a barrister. And what do you actually learn? What's different from Blackhall, say?
So I understand that the syllabus might be changing, or has even changed a little bit since I was there. But fundamentally, what you're learning, which is different from Blackhall, I would say, is you're concentrated primarily on procedure. So rules of court procedure. So how litigation actually works, which is not something that you touch upon at all in or you might touch upon it very briefly, but whereas in your undergrad in college you'll be learning about substantive issues of the law, what the law of contract says on this, what the Constitution says about that. In King's Inns, you're more concerned with what the rules of court procedure are. So how litigation actually works from start to finish, what a motion is, how you draft particular motions, how you draft pleadings, and the kind of the niche professional information that's necessary to be an advocate. And you do kind of a refresher course at the start where you go over the first principle stuff with respect to to contract law, to the law of tort. But primarily, as I said, it's about the rules of court procedure. And when I was there, at least, it was broken up in such a way that you would kind of cover criminal procedure and civil procedure separately. And in the currency of both of those classes or those modules, you would also learn civil advocacy and criminal advocacy. And it's quite a different learning experience than it is in college. So it's not a big lecture hall. They're very small classes, maybe 20 to 30 in each class. More in the nature of a seminar. So you'd be broken up into small groups, and there'd be exercises to do. So we might do a negotiation exercise, we might do an advocacy exercise, and so on and so forth. So it's much more it's much more hands-on, I would say, in terms of how it's delivered and what's required of you. There's much more active participation required in the class than there is in a university lecture.
You graduated from King's Inns and then you went over to London to study a Masters of Law at UCL. I guess there's kind of two questions there. What was your master's and why UCL?
So it was in international finance and banking law, which was just something I was generally interested in. It's something that isn't, or at least at the time, I think wasn't offered here in Ireland, or at least it wasn't offered to the with the degree of specialization that could be done over there. So that was what I did, and I suppose the reason that I went over there, well, I suppose to answer the first question is why did I do a master's then at all? I would say, especially if you're pursuing a career at the bar, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to take the time out later on in your career to do it. So I think if I had have gone straight from the Inns down to practice, I would have found it difficult to take time out of my private practice to well, certainly not to leave the country, but even just to get the time off required to study something by distance could be difficult enough. So I thought, if I want to go abroad, I better do it before I actually start practicing. So I'll get qualified as a barrister, and then I'll do the masters. And while UCL, always performs exceptionally well in the university rankings tables for whatever that's worth, London is just a great city, just an amazing experience, something which I'd recommend for anyone who can get the opportunity to go away on Erasmus or to study abroad. If it's something that you're interested in, I'd say definitely take it when you can. I didn't do Erasmus when I was in UCD. It was something that I was kind of that I kind of regretted not having done, and I thought, well, now is my chance to move away for a little bit. But no, again, I very much enjoyed my time there. An amazing experience, some great friends. I thought the quality of teaching was absolutely excellent. I'm not sure to what extent it actually has helped in my practice or in my professional career. Probably it helps a little bit in terms of getting the gig in Trinity, which we might talk about in a bit. But I just think, especially for a career at the bar, get it out of the way while you can, because your opportunities may be limited later on in terms of getting the time off to actually go and do something like that. And
I think there's always this worry among law students that they can't travel with their degrees. So, well, you said there that it wasn't really applicable, but is, going abroad for a master's, do students have to worry about that not being applicable to the jurisdiction when they come back?
It's a good point. I mean, if you're going over to study in the States or something like that, and you're learning all about American law, it may not be of direct relevance to your professional life here once you come back. I mean, my thing was quite international in its application. So we were talking about broad principles of financial regulation and banking law and the law of international investment arbitration and things like that. So it was something which is useful and is applicable here. But yeah, I suppose also having a qualification from the UK or from the States or from wherever it might be, I think it is something probably which employers would look favorably upon, even if you're not being considering a career at the bar. If you want to be a solicitor or something like that, if you have a degree from another jurisdiction, it's obviously going to be useful. So the way I look at it is, if I ever decide that I want to pack this in and go over and work in London or in New York or wherever it might be, well, I've got the degree from Dublin and I've got a degree from London, so it can't hurt, I don't think.
And would most barristers have a master's? Would it be kind of not required, but would it be an unwritten rule?
No, there's no requirement whatsoever. And I would say, I mean, it might be 50-50. Amongst my friends at this stage in my career, probably most don't. I know some do, and some did what I did and got the master's before they went into practice. So after they had qualified as a barrister, but before they had gone into practice. And then some did do it while they were in their first or second year in practice. But those who did do it did it either in Trinity or did it by distance elsewhere. So I think if you're keen on actually having the international student experience and being on the campus and seeing a different city or whatever it might be, that's I think when it becomes difficult to do at a later stage. As I said, you could do it in Trinity or in UCD or whatever and still be in practice. It might be a bit difficult. You'd have to manage your practice around getting to class and doing your readings and whatever it might be. And similarly, you could do it by distance. I suspect actually probably in the next couple of years that could be more and more common now with the leaps and bounds that we've made in the last year with respect to online teaching and all that. It could be much more common actually for universities to start offering postgraduate degrees by distance, where maybe they wouldn't have in the past. So I know UCL didn't do one by distance, but King's College London did. And I was weighing up whether or not I should just do the one by distance in King's and still be able to be on track here with a year of practice earlier. But I thought, no, I might as well take the plunge and actually make the most of the year and enjoy it.
Seems ironic that you're telling students to go travel in the current circumstances, but
I know. Sorry, all this advice is prefaced with the sincere hope that by this time next year or in a year's time, students will be able to go and travel again.
You're speaking to someone whose exchange was cancelled, so I'm not bitter at all. So you came back to Ireland anyway and commenced practice as a barrister. So forgive me if I'm getting the terminology wrong here, but is that when you completed your deviling?
Exactly, yeah. So this is the other thing which maybe students don't know or don't have a strong understanding of, is just how the whole thing works in practice once you go down to the Four Courts or the CCJ and you start applying your trade. So the first thing really to understand is that all barristers in Ireland are self-employed. So we don't have a boss, we don't collect a salary from our work. And excuse me if I'm being obvious or whatever when I say this, but I think maybe students don't understand it or think that you work in a law firm or whatever it might be, and obviously that's not the case. And similarly, and maybe more unusually, we don't actually have chambers here. So where most of the system is in broad parallel to that in the UK, this is one important area of divergence, really. So in the UK, they have a thing called barristers' chambers, which is basically just a group of barristers who get together and decide to pool their resources, to rent premises and to, I'm sure buy books and, run the lights and the Wi-Fi and the photocopying and all this. And they'll also have, usually my understanding is they'll have a person called a clerk who is basically in charge of administering the practice, the chambers. And there is some degree, I think, at least in the early years of, centralized division of work. So the idea that solicitors will give work to the chambers and it'll be up to the clerk to divvy that up amongst the barristers. So as a pupil, they call them pupils over there rather than devils, but as a pupil in the chambers over there, I understand that there is, in effect, work which is handed to you by the clerk of your chambers. That isn't the way it works here. That isn't the way it works here at all. And similarly, there's a salary in most of the big commercial chambers in the UK. You'll have a salary or a stipend or something as a pupil. which oftentimes can be relatively lucrative. It's not. It's not it's not just pocket money. It's the salary which would be comparable with maybe a trainee salary in a firm. That isn't the way that it works in Ireland. It's a much different system in the sense that in order to be a member of the law library, you have to complete at least 1 year as a devil. So it's a mandatory year which you must do, where you in effect shadow a more established barrister. So they have to have been in practice for more than 7 years. So you basically follow them around. You observe them when they do their advocacy in court. You do advocacy on their behalf in cases that they might be briefed in, which they have not handed over to you, but which they have given you to do. So you'll do motions for them on a Monday, for example. You'll attend client meetings with them. Usually, if they allow you, if the solicitors will allow you, you'll basically just go with them and do what they do on a day-to-day basis, Monday to Friday for the course of the legal year. You also do usually research for them or drafting for them, and that is all done nominally at least for free, so for nothing. So you don't get paid for that. And it used to be the case that you would have to pay. It used to be the case that there are fees which are payable every year to be a member of the law library. Now, the first year they are, I don't know exactly offhand, but I'd say in the order of 3,000 or 4,000 euros. So you have to pay an annual membership fee, and in your first year you have to pay an onboarding fee. So it's like when you join a golf club, you have to pay the admission fee as well. And nominally, or at least in theory, it could be the case that as a devil, you would have to pay that yourself and then not get any money back by way of remuneration from your master. Now that was changed, I think 2 years ago, by a vote of the AGM, which saw strong support from junior members of the bar, with the effect that now it is an obligation on the master to at least pay that, and to pay some money for your insurance costs. So you have to, again, as a self-employed barrister, you have to make sure that you're insured, that you have professional indemnity insurance. And that is now all taken care of by your master in the first year. Now, having said that, while that was maybe the worst case scenario, in practice most masters are actually very generous, and they would pay that anyway, and they would pay you maybe some more money at Christmas and Easter and at the end of term. So it all very much depends, and this, I guess, goes to the heart of the question about having the knowledge before you go down, or knowing who the person that you want to devil for is, making sure that you have that connection, or you've chosen someone who's a good person, who's going to look after you, and is going to be able to get you the right exposure and the right experience to make sure that you have a fruitful and successful career after you finish deviling. But that is in practice what the first year is like.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of always a concern amongst students that amongst everyone, that there seems to be this huge financial barrier to becoming a barrister. And realistically, you've mentioned some change there, but do you think that's going to change anytime soon?
No, I don't think. I don't think that the fee structure is going to change anytime soon. But in fairness to the law library, I think you get a pretty good deal for what you pay. So if I were to want to go out there and rent a desk in Dublin City Centre, and if I was to sign up for a subscription for all the various databases, etc., it'd cost me much more than what my annual subscription is. So I think in terms of the subscription fees, you get good value there, and it scales pretty well in the sense that it ascends according to seniority. So when you start off, you're on the lowest point in the scale, and it moves up a little bit every year of practice thereafter. I don't think that there's going to be any wholesale changes with respect to the devil relationship, and I think you just kind of have to accept it for what it is. It's not a get rich quick scheme, and that's one thing it definitely isn't. So you're not going to become a barrister and practice for a year or two and make a fortune. You have to kind of reconcile yourself with the fact that in the short term you will be worse off than all your friends. Broadly speaking, you'll be worse off than all your friends who go and get training contracts in a law firm, or who go off and do something else. But the trade-off is the fact that you enjoy. For me, it's a great quality of life. You're self-employed. You again don't have to worry about, taking time off, for example, if I need to go to a wedding or whatever like this, or if I need to, whenever social life resumes and you can take days off, you don't have to worry about getting permission for that. You can set your own hours. You can be as hardworking or as lazy as you want. But I mean, it is a great profession. You've got great colleagues, and there's a real sense of collegiality at the bar. That's something that they always hammer home. And the idea that you can always ask a colleague, for help if there's a particular specialist in an area. I've never once felt, shy or afraid to say to someone who's more senior to me, who has expertise in a particular area, listen, I've got this case or this issue that I think you would know about. Will you please, help me? And they will do that for you, no problem. Almost all of the time, you'll never have any problem finding someone to give you a bit of advice. So yeah, I mean, as I said, just to be realistic about things, you're not going to be a millionaire at 23 or 24, whatever it is, from your 1 year in practice at the bar. But if it works out, if you've got a successful career, it's an immensely enjoyable profession. And I mean, it can be financially lucratively rewarding as well. Once you've established yourself and once you've got the work coming in.
You're obviously very passionate about it. I was talking to someone today who had done the whole barrister thing, and they're a lot older, and they said it's changed so much that, this is an incredibly successful person. They said it's changed so much that they don't think they'd end up practicing as a barrister if they were to go back and do it. And it is competitive. You are self-employed. Many people who go to King's Inns won't end up actually practicing. Has there ever been a time when you doubted your career choice and said, oh, I could have just got a training contract?
No, not yet. Not yet. I don't know. Maybe give me 5 more years.
Sorry to be so pessimistic.
No, it's definitely a valid question. But I mean, my philosophy all along was you have to be in it for the long haul, or at least the medium haul. There's no point in, and this is something I'd say to anyone who's coming down. There's no real point in setting out at the outset and saying, well, I'm going to give it 1 or 2 years and see how I get on, because that really I don't think is long enough to know or to find out whether or not it is going to work out for you. And I do have a lot of friends who have left, or at least some friends who have left at this stage, who have been only called at the same time as me, so they're only in their 4th year of practice and they've already called it quits. So it obviously doesn't work out for everyone, but I think if it's something that you're passionate about, I'm going to say maybe 2 contradictory things now. The first of which is that if it's something that you're passionate about, I think you should just give it a go. If it's what you want to do, if it's what you aspire to be, I would say give it a go whenever you can. So take a punt on it. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You can always go off and do something else. I mean, after 3 years, you can just apply straight away, and I think with relatively minimal effort, be transferred to the role of solicitors. And there you go. That's nothing ventured, nothing gained. At least you gave it a shot. Similarly, 5, 6, 7 years, if it doesn't work out, you can go off and do something else. I mean, there are jobs advertised all the time in the public and the private sector, which say, solicitor or barrister 7+ years PQE. So, if you've given it 7 or 8 years and it hasn't worked out, there are plenty of jobs which are there, which you're going to be tailor made for, and you're not going to have any problem, I think, getting a job after having done your 7 or 8 years practice, or even your 3 years practice. And you will have unquestionably have had some really, really fun days along the way, some really fun experiences. So I think yeah, give it a go. If it's something that you're interested in. The other thing that I was going to say, which is maybe contradictory to that, is if for any reason you didn't give it a go, it's never too late. It's never too late to make a switch. And there would have been a lot of people with me in the King's Inns who were, in their middle age, or even, in more advanced years, people who were retired from the civil service, or, other jobs that they'd been in for a long time, had got the BL degree and were then coming down, to have a crack at the bar. So again, it is never too late. And I have a lot of friends who, or at least some friends who have gone off and secured training contracts, or had gotten jobs in other industries. and are deciding now that they want to come down, that they want to make a go of it. So there's no, I would be loath to prescribe any one particular path that is the correct path or the right way to do it, because I don't think that exists. I think whatever suits you and your personal circumstances, and however you want to come to it. I think there are people from so many different walks of life, people who have come to it from so many different ways, that just don't be afraid to make a stab of it.
I also just want to mention briefly the fact that you also tutor at Trinity College in land law and commercial law, is it?
Yeah, land law and commercial law, and I've been doing that now basically since I started in first year. It was one of these flukes. One of the other devils knew someone who was a PhD student in Trinity, and she was, I think, supposed to be teaching that land law class, and it fell through at the last minute, and the lecturer needed. Sorry, it was commercial law. Actually, the first thing that I got into was in the second semester of my first year at the bar. And Deirdre Hearn, who's the lecturer on that module, needed a replacement cover at the last minute, and I just responded to a WhatsApp message and got the details and got into it. So that's something which I've really enjoyed. I do that now. At this stage, I do that more for the enjoyment than for the money. But it was definitely very useful in that first year, just to have something, some small income coming in. But that does underline, I suppose, the need in the early years to do something. To have something else on the go to supplement your income, and lecturing is one thing which people definitely do quite a lot of. That's one popular thing to do. Another, more popular and something which demands more time to do is discovery work. So this would be a big earner for people in the junior bar in their early years. So broadly speaking, it could be document review or discovery. So in the context of, litigation, a discovery order might be made, which says, certain documents have to be delivered up to the other side. And depending on the complexity of the case, it could be 1 million documents or something that have to be checked and potentially discovered. So an awful lot of junior barristers will engage in this sort of work. So again, it can be from as little as 5 to 10 hours a week. Some people might do 30 to 40 hours a week on particular weeks. So there is really a balancing act that has to be struck if you're doing that, because the temptation can be there because it's relatively lucrative, and because you might not be so busy otherwise. The temptation could be there to kind of bite off more than you can chew, or to do too much of that work to the detriment of your own practice, because you still need to be around. You still need to be around in the vicinity of the forecourts to do your actual job being a barrister.
My penultimate question seems a bit useless now, because you've somewhat spent the whole interview just giving advice to aspiring barristers. But if you had to put it into 1 or 2 sentences, if I said give advice to an aspiring barrister, what would you say?
Sorry for having preempted your question and given so much useful advice earlier on.
My job easier.
Well, one piece of advice I would give that I haven't already said is, if you're a law student who's interested in a career at the bar, go down to the forecourts or the CCJ as often as you can, because I remember my time in UCD, the contact hours are fairly minimal, and you might not want to actually open a book and study on a particular day, but if you're interested in a career, either as a barrister or as a solicitor in litigation, go down to the forecourts. Justice is administered in public. People maybe don't realize this, but you can walk into more or less any court in the land on any given day and see, everything that's going on. Obviously there are exceptions with things that are in camera, but those are, the minority. So all of the important, litigation in the Supreme Court is, freely available for people to go in and sit down and watch, real masters of their craft, advocates in work, and what you would learn from that is absolutely invaluable. I mean, that forms part of your education at King's Inns. You have to follow a very structured kind of court timetable over the course of the year. So, certain days you will be sent down and just told to just go and watch and just see what's happening, because that is how you learn. I mean, fundamentally, even after you're in the King's Inns, in your first, second, or third year of practice, you learn so much just by watching other people who've been doing it longer than you, who are more competent than you. And yeah, that's it. It's almost by osmosis, just seeing how it's done, and watching them, in full flow. So that's something I definitely give. That's one definite piece of advice I'd give to students is, if you're interested in it, go down and have a look at it, because you'll get more value sometimes down in the CCJ, watching a criminal trial, than you will in Cineworld or the Savoy, for the €20, whatever it costs to go in and buy a ticket to some picture. Go down and just sit in a criminal trial, and you'll get, if you're interested in it, you'll get just as much entertainment, and it's totally free, and it might actually, nudge you in the direction of a career, which hopefully you'll take on and hopefully you'll enjoy.
And then our last question is something we ask everyone who's on the Grad Life podcast, and that is, if you had to give one book recommendation.
Well, the cliched answer here, I suppose, is say go off and read The Secret Barrister. But I read that, and I actually didn't think much of it. I thought it was a little bit too prosaic. It was more like reading a student's college essay. I mean, it's a perfectly fine book, but it's not one that I would recommend. What I would recommend is a book on broadly the same topic, I suppose. So it's kind of a semi-autobiographical. It's a fully autobiographical story about a criminal barrister called Alex McBride. The book is called Defending the Guilty, and it was a book that I read when I was in sixth year, I think. So it was probably recently released at that stage. So I'd say about 10 years old now, and it's amazing. It touches upon all the same issues that the guy in The Secret Barrister, well, it could be a girl, whoever he or she is who wrote it, touches upon with respect to the underfunding of the criminal justice system and all the flaws that go along with it. But the stories I haven't read it now in a while, but I remember the stories being just hilariously funny, very well written, and really something that makes you want to pursue a career at the bar in a way that I think probably The Secret Barrister doesn't. I read that very recently, and I thought, if I was reading this, as an 18 or 19-year-old, I don't think I'd actually find this particularly interesting or enticing as a career. But reading Defending the Guilty, which is the Alex McBride book, I thought, yeah, this is for me. Although obviously now I don't do any criminal law at all, which is another thing we didn't even touch upon. How long have we been talking? Probably an hour, and we didn't even touch upon that distinction. But yeah, that's maybe a topic for another class. But yeah, another interview. But yeah, Defending the Guilty, that's the one I'd recommend.
Well, thanks, Samuel. The interview it was meant to be about you, and it's kind of turned into you just giving advice to law students. But that's, I guess, the whole idea of it. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me, Isabel.